The sun had long disappeared behind the horizon, leaving the wide-open ranch shrouded in a deep, cold darkness. The wind whispered across the fields, carrying the scent of dry grass and earth, and the tall skeletal shapes of trees cast long shadows over the land. The rancher had been working since dawn, tending to his cattle, repairing fences, and mending broken equipment. Every day was hard, but nights like this felt lonelier than any other. He pulled his coat tighter around his shoulders and trudged slowly toward the small cabin that marked the heart of his property. The cold seemed to seep through his boots, up through his legs, and into his very bones, making him long for a warm fire and a quiet corner to rest. He had just started down the narrow path leading from the grazing fields to the cabin, when he saw a small flicker of light in the distance. At first, he thought it might be the reflection of the moon on something metallic, or perhaps a wandering lantern someone had left behind. But as he walked closer, he realized the light was different. It danced gently, moving as if it had its own life. It was soft and golden, unlike the harsh glare of any artificial light he had ever seen. Curiosity overcame his fatigue, and he moved toward it, his boots crunching on the frost-covered grass. There, near the edge of the woods that bordered his ranch, he saw her. A young girl, no more than 16, with dark hair that shone even in the dim light. She was sitting beside a small fire she had built on the ground. The flames were low but steady, flickering across her calm face and bright eyes. She was alone, yet she did not seem afraid or cold. She looked up as he approached, and for a moment he could hardly believe his eyes. There was something unusual about the way she carried herself. Despite the chill and the darkness surrounding her, she seemed to belong to the night, as if she had stepped out from the shadows themselves. The rancher stopped a few feet away, unsure of what to say. Strangers rarely appeared on his land, and in the middle of a freezing night, this was even more unusual. But then she spoke, her voice soft yet steady, carrying over the wind like a gentle melody. "I will warm you tonight," she said. There was no fear in her words, no hesitation, just quiet assurance. It was a simple statement, but it struck him in a way he did not expect. There was kindness in her tone, a sense of calm that seemed to reach into the weariness of his soul. He hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should approach. His life on the ranch had taught him to be cautious, especially with strangers. Yet there was something in her eyes that made him feel safe. She did not demand anything from him. She offered warmth without expecting it in return. Slowly, he stepped closer, keeping his hands tucked into his coat pockets to fend off the cold. The flames of her small fire reflected in his eyes as he drew near, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Words seemed unnecessary. The simple presence of the fire, the girl, and the quiet night was enough. Finally, he settled on a nearby rock, close enough to feel the heat of the fire, but far enough to give her space. She smiled, a gentle smile that seemed to lighten the darkness around them. She gestured to the space beside her, inviting him without saying it directly. He shook his head, not out of refusal, but out of surprise at how quickly he felt a strange sense of comfort in her presence. He had spent countless nights alone on the ranch, sitting by his own fires, listening to the wind and the distant calls of animals. But this night felt different. It felt like a meeting arranged by fate itself. A moment meant to happen in the stillness of the cold night. The girl added more wood to her fire, and the flames leapt higher, casting dancing shadows across the ground. The warmth reached him slowly, spreading through his body, easing the stiffness in his muscles from the day's labor. He noticed small details about her that he might have missed at first glance. The careful way she arranged the logs, concentration in her eyes, the soft hum she made as she worked. It was clear that this was not her first time being in the wild at night. She knew how to survive, how to take care of herself. And yet she had chosen to share her warmth with a complete stranger as he sat there. He couldn't help but wonder how she had come to be here, alone and unafraid. The ranch was miles from the nearest town, and the woods around it were vast and often unforgiving. He thought of the dangers that lurked in the night, the wild animals and the bitter cold, and he marveled at her bravery. There was a quiet strength about her, a confidence that did not need to be spoken aloud. She had a presence that filled the space around the fire, making the darkness feel less threatening, the night less lonely. the wind shifted, carrying with it the distant sound of rustling leaves and the faint cry of an owl. The rancher shivered, and she noticed immediately. Without a word, she reached into the small bag she had beside her and pulled out a thick blanket. She draped it over his shoulders, the soft fabric warm against his coat. It was a simple gesture, but it carried a weight that touched him deeply. Here was a stranger, a girl from a world he barely knew, offering him warmth and comfort without expecting anything in return. It was a rare act of kindness, something he had almost forgotten existed in his solitary life. They sat together in silence for a while. The crackling fire, the only sound besides the wind. He watched her, noticing the way her eyes reflected the flames. The gentle rise and fall of her chest as she breathed, the way she seemed at peace in the quiet night. For the first time in many long years, he felt a sense of calm wash over him. A relief that went beyond the physical warmth of the fire. It was a warmth of the heart, a sense of connection that he had not realized he was missing. The night, which had started so cold and lonely, began to feel alive with possibility. Eventually, he spoke, his voice low, almost hesitant. He asked her how she had learned to survive in such harsh conditions, how she knew so much about the woods, the animals, and the ways of nature. She answered simply, sharing bits of her life, her family, and the lessons she had learned. She spoke of respect for the land, for the creatures that lived on it, and for the people who came into their world. The rancher listened intently, absorbing her words, feeling as though he had been given a glimpse into a world he had never known. There was wisdom in her youth, a clarity that made him reconsider many of the assumptions he had held about life and survival. The night deepened, stars glittering overhead in the clear sky. The cold remained, but it no longer felt oppressive. The fire, the girl, and the quiet conversation had transformed the darkness into something comforting. He realized that sometimes the most profound experiences come in the simplest forms: a fire in the night, a stranger's kindness, a shared story. And in that moment, sitting beside a young Apache girl who had offered to warm him, the rancher felt a shift within himself. The loneliness that had haunted him for years began to fade, replaced by a gentle sense of hope and gratitude. As the hours passed, he understood that this night would stay with him forever. It was not just the warmth of the fire that mattered, but the warmth of human connection. The realization that even in the vastness of solitude, one could find unexpected friendship. He watched the flames flicker, thinking about the girl, her words, her courage, and her quiet strength. He knew that he had met someone extraordinary, someone whose presence would change the way he viewed the world. That cold, dark night had become something magical, a turning point in a life that had felt routine and predictable. When the first hints of dawn touched the horizon, he felt a sense of gratitude that went beyond words. The rancher would remember that night not for its chill, not for the work he had done, but for the quiet miracle of meeting a stranger who simply wanted to share warmth. And in that memory, he found a light that would guide him through the long, cold nights to come, a reminder that kindness could appear when least expected, and that a single act could change a life forever. The rancher woke the next morning with the memory of the fire and the girl lingering in his mind. The sun had barely risen, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and orange, and the cold of the night had given way to the crisp freshness of early morning. His cabin was quiet, the animals still stirring in the barn, but his thoughts were not on chores or the daily routines that usually consumed him. Instead, he thought of her, the young Apache girl who had sat beside the fire the night before, sharing warmth stories and something far more profound than he had expected. He remembered the way she had spoken of her family, the stories she had shared about her people, and the respect she carried for the land around her. She had described growing up learning to read the signs of the wind, understanding the movements of animals, and listening to the quiet wisdom that nature offered to those who paid attention. Her voice had been calm and steady, yet there had been a strength behind it, a sense that she had learned the lessons of life not from books or adults, but from the world itself. As he went about his morning chores, he found himself recalling her words again and again. Thinking about the simplicity and truth behind them, the rancher decided to take a walk through the fields, as he often did, to check on the cattle. The wind was gentle, carrying the scent of damp earth and morning dew. As he moved, he noticed small signs of life that he had previously ignored, the way the birds settled on the fence posts, the faint tracks of animals crossing the fields, and the way the grass whispered in the breeze. He remembered her teaching him in her quiet way to notice these things, to understand the land not just as a place to work, but as a living, breathing entity that deserved attention and care. For the first time, his routine felt different. He felt more connected to the world around him, more aware of the subtle beauty he had taken for granted. Later, he returned to the place near the woods where he had met her the night before, hoping, perhaps foolishly, that she might still be there. The fire was gone, and the earth bore no trace of her presence. Only the faintest marks where she had placed the logs and blankets. He stood there for a moment, letting the morning sun warm his face, and thought about the strange and beautiful turn of events. How could a single night, a single meeting with a stranger leave such a mark on him? And yet, it had. Her presence, her words, and her quiet strength had touched something deep within him, something he had not even realized was missing from his life. As the day passed, he went about his work on the ranch, but his thoughts kept drifting back to her. He thought about how she had prepared the fire so carefully, how she had watched him shiver and instinctively offered the blanket, and how she had shared knowledge so freely without any expectation. It was not only her kindness that impressed him, but the ease with which she had carried herself, the way she had blended strength with gentleness. He realized that he had spent so much of his life focused on survival, on labor and responsibility, that he had rarely stopped to notice the ways in which small acts of compassion could transform a moment, or even a life. That afternoon, as he repaired a broken fence near the edge of the pasture, he heard the sound of leaves rustling nearby. At first, he thought it was the wind, but then he noticed a movement among the trees. A young girl emerged, her dark hair catching the sunlight, her eyes bright and alert. His heart leaped, and he quickly straightened, unsure of how to react. She smiled at him, the same calm and steady smile from the night before. "I wanted to see how you are today," she said softly, "and I thought I might help you." The rancher was struck by her thoughtfulness. She had come not for her own benefit, but simply to offer support and companionship. Together they moved through the fields, and she began pointing out things he had never noticed. She showed him how to spot signs of illness in the cattle before it became serious, how to identify plants that could be useful for healing minor cuts or calming a fever, and how to listen to the wind to predict changes in the weather. He watched her work with ease, her movements confident and precise, and he felt a growing sense of admiration and gratitude. She was not just kind. She was wise beyond her years, carrying knowledge that he had never learned despite decades on the land. As the day wore on, they returned to the small clearing near the woods where the fire had burned. She helped him build a proper fire this time, showing him how to arrange the logs so that the flames burned steadily and lasted longer. The rancher listened carefully, noting each detail and realizing that he had taken even basic skills for granted. She laughed softly when he struggled to light the kindling, a sound that was gentle and infectious, and he found himself laughing too. A rare and unburdened laughter that felt as freeing as the open fields around them. They sat by the fire, sharing simple food the rancher had brought, and the conversation deepened. She spoke of the seasons, how each one carried its own lessons and rhythms, and how life required patience and observation to truly understand. She told stories of her childhood, of mornings spent watching the sunrise over hills, of learning to track deer and rabbits, of nights under the stars, where the world seemed both infinite and intimately close. The rancher listened, captivated not only by her words, but by the way she spoke with reverence and clarity. Her stories painted pictures in his mind, bringing the land and life to him in ways he had never imagined. As evening approached, the sky painted itself in brilliant shades of orange and purple, and the air turned cool once again. The rancher realized that he had spent the entire day in the girl's company, learning from her, listening, and laughing. There was a joy in the simplicity of their time together, a happiness that had nothing to do with wealth or work, but everything to do with connection and understanding. He felt a profound sense of respect for her, and he also felt a stirring within himself, a desire to live differently, to notice more, to appreciate life more deeply. Before she left, she placed her hand briefly on his shoulder, a gesture of friendship and reassurance. "Remember what you've learned today," she said softly. "The world is full of signs and lessons if you only take the time to see them. And always remember that kindness matters, even in small moments." The rancher nodded, feeling the truth of her words sink into him. She disappeared into the trees as quietly as she had come, leaving him alone by the fire, but his heart was full. The day had been cold, but it had also been filled with warmth from the fire, warmth from learning, and warmth from the extraordinary presence of a girl who had changed his perspective forever that night. As he sat by the fire in his cabin, he reflected on the day. He realized that he had learned more about life, nature, and human connection in a single day than in many years on the ranch. The Apache girl had shown him that true warmth came not just from fire or blankets, but from understanding, empathy, and the willingness to open oneself to new experiences. He thought about the lessons she had taught him, the importance of observation, the value of patience, the strength found in quiet wisdom. And he understood that these lessons would stay with him for the rest of his life, shaping not only the way he cared for his ranch and animals, but the way he approached the world and the people around him. By the end of the night, felt a transformation within himself. The loneliness that had weighed on him for so many years seemed lighter, and he carried with him a renewed sense of purpose and awareness. He knew that life would continue to be difficult at times, that the ranch required endless effort and attention. But he also knew that the world held moments of beauty and connection that could transform even the hardest of lives, and he would carry the memory of her smile, her voice, and her quiet strength with him always. A reminder that life could change in the simplest of ways, sometimes with nothing more than warmth offered by a stranger on a cold night. The next morning, the rancher woke to the quiet hum of life around the ranch. The animals were beginning to stir, birds called from the trees, and the soft sunlight stretched across the fields. Yet, as he moved about his chores, his mind remained fixed on the Apache girl who had changed the rhythm of his days and nights. Her lessons were still fresh in his memory, the way she had guided him through the woods, the fire-building techniques, and most importantly, the wisdom she had shared about life. There was a warmth in his heart that no fire could replicate, a feeling of gratitude for a stranger who had touched his life so deeply. He decided to follow her teachings more intentionally that morning. Instead of rushing through his work, he paused to watch the animals carefully, noticing subtle signs that he had ignored before: the slight limp of a young calf, the way a cow's eyes shifted nervously, or the faint traces of food eaten from the ground. He remembered her words about patience and observation. Each detail mattered, each movement had meaning. By slowing down, he felt a sense of connection to the land that went far beyond the routine of feeding, herding, and repairing. He was no longer just a man tending a ranch. He was a witness to life, learning to understand the silent language of nature. Later, as he walked near the forest, he thought about the girl's bravery and wisdom. He remembered how calmly she had spoken about survival, her effortless understanding of the world around her, and how she had taught him to be aware without fear. The lessons she had given were practical, yes, but they were also philosophical, teaching him patience, humility, and respect. He realized that the cold, harsh nights he had endured for years could have been more than survival exercises. It could have been opportunities for learning. If only he had opened his eyes and heart that afternoon. He found himself near the small clearing where the fire had been. He recalled how she had built it, the precision with which she arranged the logs, and how she had shared the warmth so generously. For a moment, he closed his eyes and imagined her there again, smiling and calm. A sudden breeze rustled the leaves, and he felt her presence in the air, as if her spirit lingered to remind him of what he had learned. He realized that her teachings were not just about fire or survival, they were about how to live, to approach each day with mindfulness, care, and compassion. He decided to test himself. Taking a small stack of firewood, he attempted to build a fire just as she had shown him. At first, the logs would not catch properly, and the kindling smoked without flame. He muttered a frustrated curse under his breath, but then he remembered her laughter, gentle yet firm, and he tried again with patience. Slowly, the fire took, small flames licking the air, spreading warmth across his hands and face. He felt a sense of accomplishment, not just in lighting the fire, but in understanding the value of persistence, observation, and care. It was a small moment, but it reminded him of the girl and how a single day with her had shifted the way he approached challenges. The day moved on, and he wandered into the fields, observing the movements of the cattle. He noticed how the younger calves mimicked the older ones, how the animals reacted to subtle changes in the environment, and how the land itself seemed to speak to those who were willing to listen. He thought of her instructions about the wind, how to tell when a storm was coming, and how to read the signs of nature that others often overlooked. Her teachings had become a lens through which he now saw the world, making the mundane seem extraordinary and the ordinary moments filled with potential lessons. As the afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the fields gold, the rancher heard a rustling nearby. His heart leaped, and he turned quickly, half expecting to see the girl again. But it was only the wind shaking the leaves. Still, the thought of her brought a smile to his face. He realized that her influence had already become a part of him, guiding his actions and thoughts even in her absence. She had left a mark that could not be erased, a memory that inspired him to live more attentively, more kindly, and more fully. That evening, he decided to try another one of her lessons: listening. He sat on a fallen log, closing his eyes and focusing on the sounds around him, the distant call of a hawk, the soft murmuring of the stream, the gentle rustle of grass in the wind. At first, his mind wandered to the problems of the ranch, to the work still left undone, but then he returned to the sounds. The subtle rhythms of the land. He realized how much he had ignored in the past. How often he had overlooked the beauty and knowledge available to him simply because he had been too busy or distracted. The girl had shown him that life's lessons were always present, waiting for someone patient enough to notice. As darkness fell, he returned to the cabin, carrying firewood for the night. He prepared a small fire, remembering the careful steps she had demonstrated. The flames danced and flickered, casting warm light across the cabin walls. For a moment, he imagined her sitting beside him, sharing a quiet conversation, teaching him the secrets of patience, understanding, and observation. He realized that her presence had given him more than knowledge. It had given him confidence, courage, and a renewed sense of purpose. He was no longer just surviving. He was learning to live. Days passed, and the rancher found himself thinking more and more about the girl's wisdom. Her words echoed in his mind, guiding him as he tended the land, cared for the animals, and moved through the daily routines of ranch life. He began to notice patterns he had never seen before, the way the sun reflected off the river at certain times of day, the behavior of animals before storms, and even the subtle changes in the soil that indicated a coming shift in the weather. Each observation brought him a deeper understanding of the land and a greater respect for its rhythms and lessons. He also noticed changes within himself. He was more patient, more attentive, and more willing to embrace the quiet moments of life. He listened more carefully to the sounds of the ranch, the stories of neighbors, and even the simple movements of his animals. The girl's lessons had opened his eyes to a world he had previously ignored, a world full of knowledge, beauty, and subtle connection. He realized that life's most important lessons were not always taught in classrooms or books, but through experience, observation, and the guidance of those willing to share their wisdom freely. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant streaks of orange and red, he decided to take a walk to the edge of the woods again. He remembered how she had guided him, how her calm presence had encouraged him to see the world differently. He walked slowly, noticing the small details, the way the shadows stretched across the ground, the sound of distant birds settling in for the night, the cool air brushing against his skin. He felt a sense of peace that he had never experienced before, a feeling that life, despite its challenges, held moments of beauty and learning at every turn. As he sat by a small stream, he reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. The girl had been gone for days, yet her influence remained, shaping the way he saw the world and the choices he made. Her lessons in patience, observation, kindness had become integral to his daily life, reminding him that even the smallest actions could have a profound impact. He realized that he had been given a gift, not in the form of material wealth, but in the knowledge that life's true richness came from understanding, connection, and the willingness to open oneself to new experiences. That night, as he prepared for bed, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. The Apache girl had shown him the value of attention, patience, and kindness, and he knew that he would carry her lessons with him forever. He thought about the future, about how he might continue to learn and grow, and about the ways in which he could share what he had discovered with others. Her presence had sparked a transformation in him, turning ordinary days into lessons in living, helping him to see the extraordinary in the everyday. And so, as he lay down to rest, the rancher closed his eyes with a sense of calm and hope. He knew that life on the ranch would continue to be demanding, that challenges would come and go. But he also knew that he had been forever changed by the simple wisdom and warmth of a young girl who had shared a fire, a story, and a lesson in life. The night was quiet, but inside him, there was a warmth that would never fade, a reminder that the smallest acts of kindness and the quietest lessons could create ripples that last a lifetime. The next morning, the rancher awoke with a sense of quiet purpose. The early light of dawn spilled across the fields, casting golden hues over the grass, the trees, and the animals moving gently in the pasture. The memory of the Apache girl was vivid in his mind. He realized that the lessons she had taught him were no longer just memories. They had become a part of him. Her wisdom, her kindness, and the warmth she had shared that first night were now guiding his thoughts and actions every day. He felt a renewed connection to the land, the animals, and even the people who lived near his ranch, and it was a connection he had never experienced before. As he walked through the fields, he noticed changes in himself that surprised him. He moved more slowly, observing carefully, listening to the sounds of life around him. He could hear the subtle movements of the cattle, the rustle of birds through the trees, and even the whispers of the wind as it passed over the hills. Each sound seemed to tell a story. Each movement carried meaning, and he realized how much he had been missing in the past. The girl's teachings had opened his eyes to the details of life he had once overlooked. Life was no longer just work and survival. It was a series of lessons, a series of moments to notice, to learn from, and to appreciate. That afternoon, he decided to visit the small clearing near the woods where she had first warmed him by the fire. The place was quiet, with only the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of an owl breaking the stillness. He knelt down to examine the ground, noticing the small signs of the fire she had built, the subtle markings in the soil, the faint traces of ashes, and the carefully arranged stones. Memories of that night came rushing back, her calm voice, the gentle smile on her face, and the way she had made him feel safe and cared for. He realized that her influence was far greater than he had imagined. She had not just given him warmth, she had changed the way he saw the world, taught him the value of attention, patience, and empathy, and shown him the extraordinary in the ordinary. The rancher spent hours in that clearing, thinking and reflecting. He remembered her words about the land, the animals, and the lessons found in every moment. He recalled her stories of observing nature, reading signs in the wind, and understanding the rhythms of life around her. He thought about how she had patiently guided him, showing him not only practical skills, but also a philosophy of living that he had never known before. Each lesson seemed more important than the last, and he realized that the girl had given him a gift far beyond anything he could have imagined, a new way of seeing, a new way of being, and a deeper understanding of life itself. When he returned to his cabin, he began to notice other changes as well. He found himself more patient with the animals, more attentive to their needs, and more willing to take time to understand what they were telling him. He treated them with care, not just as livestock, but as living beings with their own rhythms, behaviors, and needs. He also began to notice the small things around his property, the way the sunlight hit the hills at certain times of day, the subtle patterns of weather, and the signs that foretold the arrival of storms. Her lessons in observation, patience, and respect for life had become integrated into everything he did, and he felt a profound sense of gratitude for the wisdom she had shared. As the days passed, the rancher also began to notice changes within himself on a personal level. He was more open to conversations with neighbors, more willing to offer help when it was needed, and more compassionate toward those who struggled. He realized that her teachings extended far beyond survival on the land. They applied to relationships, human kindness, and the way one approached the world. He found himself listening more carefully, speaking less, and taking time to understand the people around him. Life felt fuller, richer, and more meaningful, and he understood that this transformation had been sparked by a single night, by a single act of warmth from a young girl who had offered her fire without expectation. One evening, as he watched the sun dip below the horizon in brilliant shades of orange and pink, he thought about the night he had first met her. He remembered the way she had built the fire, the careful way she had watched him, and the quiet confidence in her voice. It was astonishing to him that such a simple act, inviting him to share warmth, could leave such a lasting impression. He realized that her presence had not only taught him practical skills, but it also taught him the value of generosity, the power of quiet strength, and the importance of human connection. Even though she was gone, her lessons remained, woven into the fabric of his daily life. The rancher began to take extra care with everything he did. When tending the animals, he noticed even the smallest signs of discomfort or illness, attending to them before they became serious problems. When tending the fields, he watched for changes in the soil, the plants, and the movements of wildlife. Understanding that each small detail was part of a larger story, he began to approach life with more mindfulness, patience, and gratitude. Realizing that the world was full of lessons waiting for those willing to observe and listen, the girl had taught him that life was not simply about surviving. It was about noticing, learning, and connecting with the world around him. One day, he visited a nearby stream where he and the girl had once walked together. He remembered her teaching him how to read the water, how to observe the movements of fish, and how to listen to the sounds of the flowing stream to understand the rhythms of the environment. He practiced these skills carefully, feeling a sense of peace and fulfillment. For the first time, he understood the quiet power of observation, the beauty of patience, and the value of slowing down to truly see and understand the world. Her lessons had become more than guidance. They had become a way of life. Even as the seasons changed, he continued to feel her influence. The long, cold nights of winter no longer seemed lonely or harsh because he carried within him the warmth she had given him. He thought about her often, imagining her strong, calm presence and remembering the lessons she had shared. The rancher knew that she had transformed his life not through grand gestures or dramatic events, but through the quiet power of kindness, observation, and understanding. The impact of that single night stretched far beyond the moments they had shared by the fire, had reshaped the way he lived, worked, and related to the world. He also found himself sharing what he had learned with others. When neighbors came by for help or advice, he offered it patiently and thoughtfully, drawing on the wisdom he had received. When young people visited the ranch, he encouraged them to observe, listen, and respect the land, sharing not only practical skills, but also the deeper lessons about life, patience, and human kindness. He realized that her gift had created a ripple effect by sharing what he had learned. He was honoring her teachings and passing them forward. As the years went by, the rancher often returned to the small clearing near the woods. Reflecting on the night when everything had changed, he would sit by the fire, remembering her smile, her voice, and the quiet strength she had shared. Though she had disappeared into the world and he did not know what had become of her, he carried her presence in his heart. Her lessons had become part of his identity, shaping the way he lived, worked, and related to others. He understood that life's most profound moments often came quietly, without fanfare or expectation, and that a single act of warmth could leave an enduring mark on a person's soul. The rancher knew that his life would continue to have challenges. The work on the ranch was never ending. The weather, unpredictable, and the animals always in need of care, but he faced these challenges with a renewed sense of purpose and resilience. He approached each day with patience, mindfulness, and gratitude, remembering the lessons she had taught him. He had learned to see the extraordinary in the ordinary, to find meaning in small acts of kindness, and to understand that connection and empathy were as vital as physical labor. Finally, one crisp evening, as the sun sank behind the hills and the first stars appeared in the sky, he sat by the fire in his cabin. He felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that his life had been forever changed by a single night with an extraordinary girl. He understood that her warmth had not only kept him comfortable that cold evening, it had ignited a spark within him. It would continue to burn for the rest of his life. He smiled softly, feeling gratitude, hope, and a quiet joy that came from knowing that the world held moments of beauty and connection waiting to be discovered. The rancher knew that the Apache girl had given him a gift that could not be measured, only felt. It was a gift of wisdom, patience, kindness, and the knowledge that life's most meaningful lessons often come in the simplest forms. That night, by the fire, when she had said she would warm him, had set in motion a transformation that touched every aspect of his life, from the way he cared for his land and animals to the way he approached the people and world around him. And he understood that true warmth, the warmth that lasts a lifetime, comes not only from fire, but from the heart, from connection, and from the quiet, enduring power of human kindness.